the troubles in the world or your whatever concerns that you have, on your day-to-day basis.
Now, Christian Kane says that they hope someday Gavin will go on to college and have the life that was somewhat taken away from him. He said when tough things happen like this, it doesn't mean you have to give up. You just have to find a different way of getting to your goal.
Such an important lesson, so heartwarming. Coy Wire, thanks so much for bringing that to us.
Thanks, Coy.
The next hour of New Day starts right now. Good morning. Buenos dias. Welcome to your New Day. I'm Boris Sanchez.
And I'm Christy Paul. Let's talk about the White House projecting optimism despite soaring inflation that is draining your wallet. I know the very real impacts the rising interest rates are having on mortgages, car sales, and salaries.
Plus, more than 2 years into the pandemic, a key moment in the fight against coronavirus, the CDC getting ready to vote on recommending vaccines for young children.
And airlines canceled another 1,400 flights yesterday amid pilot shortages and the skyrocketing demand. Well, the efforts underway now to keep travelers moving amid this summer travel spike. Well, hopefully no alarm for you today because it is the weekend this Saturday, June 18th. Thank you for being with us.
Always great to be with you, Christy. We begin this morning with new fears that the U.S. economy is headed toward a recession.
Yeah, yesterday marked the end of a really rocky week for Wall Street after the Federal Reserve announced its largest interest rate hike in decades. They're, of course, attempting to tame inflation. The Dow closed down yesterday. S&P 500 finished slightly up, still wound up with its worst week since 2020. Now, let's look at the brighter side for a moment. We've learned that wages in the U.S. are climbing at their fastest rate since the mid-'80s. Here's the push. The inflation has risen so fast that workers, it actually equates to being handed a pay cut because their pay just is not matching up with the percentage of inflation that we're feeling in the things that we're buying.
Let's get a closer look at the political angle of this and take you now live to CNN's Jasmine Wright. She is live for us in Washington. Jasmine, the White House has been trying to strike this optimistic tone, right, saying that a recession is not inevitable, but a lot of Americans are struggling out there.
Yeah, that's right. Even President Biden yesterday, he said that his administration was doing every lever, pulling every lever really to try to get those prices down, but injected optimism. He said that he believed that the U.S. economy, in part because of his administration's efforts, are in the best position around the globe to fight this global inflation that we are seeing. But that type of optimism, Boris, does not jive with what Americans are feeling, paying more at the gas pump, at grocery stores, really for everyday goods. And so the Biden administration really has to come and try to figure out how do they message that Americans are going to be okay through this difficult time. At the same time, Biden himself and the administration at large is downplaying what a lot of economists and business folks are saying, which is that a recession may be on the way. And that comes after really they took those acts with the Federal Reserve, which they say is an independent body. But they have messaged that because of those acts from the Federal Reserve, there could be some turmoil. There's some hard time coming for the American people. Take a listen to the Biden administration yesterday here on CNN.
So the Federal Reserve is starting to act. That's generating some of the turmoil. Russia's war against Ukraine is also part of our challenge. But we need to get this inflation under control in order to emerge to where the president would like to see us get to in this economy, which is a period where we have steady, solid growth that is sustainable, where everyday Americans are working if they want to work, and they're seeing good, productive increases in their pay, and they can support their families.
So that is the key message here from the White House, trying to acknowledge that Americans are feeling pain, but trying to strike an optimistic tone here. And we even heard it from President Biden this week when he sat down for a rare 30-minute interview with the Associated Press. And he said some comments about the economy. He said that he understands that Americans are down right now, but he dismissed the idea that his administration contributed in any way to this amount of inflation we're seeing, saying that it was frankly bizarre, that notion. And he said, again, that he is optimistic about where this economy is headed, and again said that a recession was not inevitable. Comments that we've heard from him before, but of course in this moment are striking. Boris, Christy.
Yeah, and looming is the fact that just a few months from now, there are going to be midterm elections where Americans are likely going to vote on the economic woes they're facing. Jasmine Wright, live in Washington, thank you so much. So later this morning, the CDC's panel of vaccine experts is going to meet, and they're going to vote on whether to recommend Pfizer and Moderna's COVID-19 vaccines for kids as young as 6 months.
Yeah, now the majority of states have already pre-ordered shipments of this vaccine ahead of the CDC giving the okay. It is certain that there is a huge relief among parents who've been waiting for a COVID vaccine to protect younger kids. But what about those who are on the fence? Here's CNN's health reporter Jacqueline Howard.
Christy and Boris, the White House says shots could begin as early as this week. Pediatricians' offices and pharmacies will be the sites where most of these vaccines will be administered. And remember, children under 5 now have 2 options, Moderna or Pfizer. The FDA authorized both for children as young as 6 months old. Moderna is administered in 2 doses, given 4 weeks apart as a primary series, and Pfizer is administered in 3 doses as a primary series. So the first 2 doses are given 3 weeks apart. The third dose is given at least 8 weeks after the second dose. And the dosage is different for each vaccine. Moderna is given as 25 micrograms each dose for kids 5 and younger, which is half of the 50 micrograms given to older kids and a quarter of the 100 micrograms given to adolescents and adults. Pfizer is given as 3 micrograms per dose for kids younger than 5, and that's smaller than the 10 micrograms given to older kids and the 30 micrograms given to adolescents and adults. For both vaccines, common side effects include pain at the injection site, fever, headache, chills, and fatigue. And both companies, Moderna and Pfizer, have said that these child-sized doses of vaccine appear to elicit immune responses in kids that are similar to what we've seen in adults so far who receive the larger doses. Christy, Boris.
Jacqueline, thank you so much. Let's get some expertise now from CNN medical analyst and the former Baltimore City Health Commissioner, Dr. Leana Wen. Dr. Wen, always great to have you on. Get your perspective on things. How likely is it that the CDC's vaccine advisors are going to sign off on these vaccines for younger kids today?
I think it's very likely. We've already seen that the FDA advisors voted unanimously to recommend authorization. The FDA has already very thoroughly vetted these vaccines when it comes to safety and effectiveness. And I'm optimistic that the CDC advisors and the CDC are going to come to the same conclusion to give a full-throated recommendation of these vaccines. I know that there are parents like me who have been so eagerly awaiting this moment. I mean, it's been a year and a half since adults first started getting the COVID vaccine. It's been more than half a year since kids 5 and older have been able to get the vaccine. And I think parents of young kids, we've just been waiting for this moment to be able to give our children the same level of high protection that we have too.
So once shots start going into arms, I think the question then becomes how many kids are actually going to be vaccinated. There's some polling I want to share with you from Kaiser Family that shows only 18% of parents expect to get their kids vaccinated, 38% saying they're going to wait and see, another 27% say they would not vaccinate their kids. What do you make of these numbers, and what's your advice to parents who may want to wait and see, as that 38% indicates?
Well, I'm not surprised by these numbers. They actually track with what we've seen for the 5 to 11-year-olds. In that age group where vaccines have been available since last November, less than 30% of children are fully vaccinated. Now, I think it's very reasonable, actually, for parents to say, I want to wait and see, because there are so many other parents, that 18% of parents who want to get their kids vaccinated as quickly as possible, who want to be first in line. So I'd say let those parents, including me and including many physician moms that I know, who have been so eager and are desperate to get our kids vaccinated, let them go first and then see the experience of those parents and families. I do think that all parents, we want the best for our children, and what parents generally do and caregivers and guardians generally do is we turn to our pediatricians, whom we trust on advice for all other aspects of our kids' health. And so I'd say if you have questions about the vaccine, if you're not sure yet, ask your pediatrician, talk to your physician to get further guidance.
Doctor, between the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, is there much of a difference? If parents have a choice, which shot should they choose?
Well, we've seen so far is that the great news is both vaccines are very safe and they both are effective in inducing a very strong antibody response that correlates to protection against severe illness. That's the main reason why we want to vaccinate, to reduce the chance of severe illness, which is rare in children but does happen. More than 400 children in this age group of under 5s have died tragically during this pandemic. Thousands have been hospitalized. It's really distressing for little kids to get sick, and so that's what we're trying to do to prevent that kind of serious illness. When it comes to comparing these two vaccines, the studies do not compare them head to head, and so we can't say, well, one is more effective than another. But I think some parents will choose one over the other for other reasons. For example, the Moderna vaccine is 2 doses. Parents who want to get the highest level of protection fastest would probably choose the Moderna vaccine because children, if they get vaccinated next week, can be fully vaccinated by the time that the next school year starts. On the other hand, some parents might want to go with a vaccine that has a longer track record in children, because the Pfizer vaccine has been authorized for months for these 5 to 11-year-olds. And maybe some parents will say, I'd rather that my child get the Pfizer vaccine because of that track record. So I think it's very reasonable, either choice. And I suspect that a lot of parents will also say, whichever one my pediatrician's office is offering is the one that I'm going to get, which I think is also a very good choice too.
Right. So, Doctor, put this into the macro view of the pandemic. How significant is it that we're vaccinating younger kids at this stage?
I think it's very significant because this is the only group of individuals who are still ineligible for vaccination at this point. When it comes to the overall trajectory of the virus, I don't think that vaccinating little kids is going to make that much of a difference overall, because I don't think the uptake is necessarily going to be that high. But I think this presents a major change in mindset for millions of Americans. There have been a lot of parents who put their own lives on hold, who have held off on travel or in-person work or conferences or indoor dining or other things on account of their children. And so to be able to reassure those families that they can also go back to normal, I think is going to make a major difference when it comes to overall how Americans think about COVID-19.
We will, of course, be watching that decision very closely later today. We hope you'll come back and talk us through the next steps. Dr. Leana Wen, thanks so much.
Thank you, Boris.
We have a developing story this hour. Take a look there. That is the scene where crews are working to rescue several firefighters. A fire caused a building to collapse. This is in a Philadelphia neighborhood. It happened earlier this morning. Authorities say there are some firefighters who've already been rescued and taken to hospitals. The department is working, though, right now to find others. We do know at least 9 agencies are assisting with recovery efforts, including the Philadelphia Police and the American Red Cross, but we'll continue to keep you posted on updates as soon as we get them. But again, that is the scene there where they are still searching for some firefighters after a building collapsed. We're going to hear again this week from the January 6th committee. And among the witnesses next week, the Georgia Secretary of State, whom former President Trump called and asked to, quote, find nearly 12,000 votes. What we could learn from that testimony. Also, oh my goodness, it's been chaotic at America's airports amid these mounting flight cancellations we've been seeing. How the airlines are working to get travelers on the move, and why experts say, you know what, we could see a lot more of what we're seeing right now in the coming weeks.
We decided a few years ago to set out on a journey which we call Enable a Fossil-Free Living Within One Generation. And you can see all around Europe that the competitive situation is shifting away from fossil fuels and into renewables and into more nuclear power. So you can see that there's a lot of innovation going on around the fossil-free technologies, and you can also clearly see that the customer demand is shifting. And today I think we can see that companies and customers are actually moving much faster than nations or global initiatives. So I think that this is a business strategy for us. It's not a sustainability strategy first and foremost. It's a business strategy and it is sustainable, but we can clearly see that through do this transformation, we are actually getting increasingly competitive.
Regenerative gastronomy is meant to transform. It's meant to heal. It's more about getting to know the cycle of life. We directly connect the guest with the heart of nature. In my kitchen, it's very simple because we created a restaurant in the middle of a forest, and we don't have a menu. We choose and we select the best products from foraging, from agriculture, from our artisanal fishing. The world is going after 20 types of crops, but there are 8,000 types of edible plants in the world. We're losing biodiversity, and of course I'm afraid. United Nations is telling us that there are 60 harvests left for us. We need to solve the problems. The solutions have to come from us. Gastronomy plays a big role in the good health of ecosystems. The more plants, the more climate-proof we are. The more resources we have, the more carbon we sequestrate, the more food we can get.
Well, the January 6th committee is gearing up for more public hearings in the next week here. And among those scheduled to testify this time around, Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, also his deputy, Gabe Sterling. Now, you probably remember Donald Trump tried to pressure Raffensperger to, quote, find enough votes for him to win the 2020 election.
Notably not expected to appear is Trump's former White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. Former administration officials say that he actually helped prevent Trump from taking even more legally questionable steps regarding the election. Meantime, former Trump advisor Peter Navarro has pleaded not guilty to contempt of Congress charges. Navarro is refusing to cooperate with the Select Committee investigating the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol.
So let's talk about what else we could expect to see as we move forward here. I want to bring in federal prosecutor Michael Zeldin. He's host of the That Said with Michael Zeldin podcast. So good to have you with us, Michael. Thanks for being here. So I want to ask you first and foremost, has the committee, in your assessment thus far, proven that President Trump either committed crimes and if so, that he potentially did them knowingly?
I think they have laid a foundation for that for sure. What they have said is that with knowledge and corrupt intent, he engaged in a 7-part plan to obstruct the transition of power, to interfere with the obstruction of the government. And I think we've seen 2 parts of that, which is the big lie and the pressure campaign of Vice President Pence. Now, next week, as you previewed, we will hear third prong, which is the pressure on the state, which is Brad Raffensperger in Georgia and others in Michigan and Pennsylvania.
I want to ask you about President Trump's tweet during the tensions that were rising at the Capitol that day. Let's take a look at it. It says, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. You contend that that tweet, Michael, poured gasoline on the fire. How damning is it?
Well, it's actually the words of the press secretary for Trump, who she said poured gasoline on that fire. I agree with her. I think that what we see here is the attempt by the committee to say, but for that tweet, but for Trump's speech earlier in the afternoon, where he said, let's march down to the Capitol, those insurrectionists would not have breached the Capitol and would not have sought to kill Mike Pence. So there's a direct correlation between that tweet and earlier statements at the Ellipse and the breaching of the Capitol and the efforts to find Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence.
So we know the Department of Justice has requested all of the documents and the testimony from the January 6th committee at this point. And I want to listen to one of the committee members here, Representative Zoe Lofgren, about that thought that they would pass over that information in full.
Let's cut to the chase. We're going to provide what we can that's necessary for them. It just makes me wonder, though, what have they been doing over there? I mean, they have a much easier way to compel testimony under their subpoenas than we do under ours. So hopefully this shows that they're gearing up. We're going to make sure we're doing what we are able to do to assist, but we're not going to let our investigation be disrupted.
So is that a fair question as to where the DOJ has been up to this point, and where does the back and forth go?
Well, she assumes that the DOJ is not, in fact, acquiring evidence. I don't know that she knows that, because in the grand jury acquisition of information, she might not be told that. So she's assuming that they're not doing anything, which I think is necessarily conjecture on her part. But I think that in the end, the two bodies that are gathering information will share information because they have to. The DOJ needs to get what they don't have, and they also need to get what they already have acquired by themselves to make sure that what is being said to them is consistent between two bodies. So I think in the end, they will get what they want. There's just a little bit of gamesmanship going on here, but in the end, DOJ will have everything it needs to make a determination whether or not Trump or anybody else violated the criminal laws of the United States and is therefore worthy of being indicted.
Real quickly, as we look ahead to the hearings this week, there are people who are convinced that this was a fraudulent election. There's already been these 4 public hearings. Is there a gauge, Michael, of how the hearings thus far has shaped public opinion about January 6th and about Vice President Pence?
Well, clearly we know that the true believers for Donald Trump are still true believers. They're not listening. They think it's a sham hearing because President Trump has told them that. I think those who believe that Trump committed crimes similarly believe it. It's that group in the middle that said, let's hear the evidence. Let's see what they have to say about whether Trump did or didn't violate laws. And I think those people, if they are listening, can't find any basis to conclude that Trump didn't incite a riot and didn't obstruct officials' proceedings. So hopefully, for those who want Trump to be held accountable, these hearings are moving the needle.
All right. Michael Zeldin, so appreciate having your expertise with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a turbulent start to the summer travel season. Airlines canceling nearly 1,500 flights yesterday as they deal not only with weather, but also staffing shortages. What this means heading into your 4th of July weekend, straight ahead.
Africa Avant-Garde in association with Access Bank. More than banking.
We need to start developing more writers. As a producer, I'm always on the lookout for new voices, new writers, because those are the foundations of good storytelling.
The best advice I've ever received is to never stop writing, because once you start practicing the thing that you want to get good at, you start having all those inflicting thoughts of, am I good enough?
To find your voice as a filmmaker or to tell stories that have deep impact, they have to be stories that affect you yourself. If it doesn't affect you, you can't translate that into a story. Whatever you write will be superficial. So first, if you're going to tell a story that is honest, it has to be honest to you first.
Trends, tech, news, Marketplace Asia.
Travel and tourism in Asia, how airlines new and old are navigating a post-pandemic world.
Marketplace Asia, today on CNN.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
Monday, let's lift every voice. A CNN concert event with special guests, The Roots, Mickey Guyton, Earth, Wind & Fire, Khalid, Yolanda Adams, and special appearances by President Biden, Vice President Harris, former First Lady Michelle Obama, and so much more. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom, live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
I'm Delia Gallagher in Rome, and this is CNN.
The busy summer travel season is off to a rocky start. Thousands of flight cancellations and sky-high prices for tickets. Airlines canceled nearly 1,500 flights yesterday, and there are nearly 500 already canceled today.
Sources tell CNN Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg has urged airline executives to review their flight plans ahead of the 4th of July holiday. Of course, we know that's coming up, just to try to soften the impact of flight summer cancellations. This comes after more than 2,700 flights were canceled over Memorial Day weekend. 2,700. Now, Delta has led the way, saying it would cancel about 100 flights a day to minimize disruptions. But Delta's pilots union published a letter saying they're being overworked and they're frustrated.
Our issue really began a while ago during COVID, and we've been making it very clear to Delta management for quite a while that we are not staffed appropriately for this summer flying. We don't have enough pilots, and the company is scheduling more flights than they can fly. We've been very vocal about it for the last few months. We've been picketing at Delta bases and hubs throughout the system to send that message that our pilots are tired and we're frustrated, we're fatigued.
Despite the cancellations and the delays, passengers, they're paying for the flights because they want to go. In May of 2021, for instance, the average price of an airline ticket in the U.S. was $195. Now, it's $336. Well, George Ferguson, senior aerospace and airlines analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence, is with us now. So good to have you with us, George. 1,500 flights. just it almost sounds insane. I mean, you're going to have people sitting at the airport wondering what to do with this. What do you know about the discussions that are going on right now between the FAA and airlines as they try to talk about ways to improve?
Well, so we're not privy to those discussions, but what we do know is, all the airlines already have schedules out there and sold most of those tickets. So it's going to be really hard for them to change what's going to happen on July 4th, right? And I think they could probably change what's going to happen later in the summer. But if you think about how the airline business has run recently, because of the pandemic, they've really had a lot of their demand compressed into the summer months when leisure travelers get away. They want to go to, outside destinations where they feel more comfortable. So the airlines would really like to fly as much as they can this summer, generate as much cash, as much profit, because they just don't know what the winter holds. And the winter could hold a COVID spike, and even this year, we're kind of looking at a slowing economic growth as we get as we get it, I think, into the fall and winter months. I think they're concerned about that. So management wants to fly as much as they can, and obviously the pilots, they feel stretched right now, and the rest of the staff probably feels stretched as well.
So when we hear about these massive cancellations, as a passenger, what options do we have?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, it's summer season, right? And so summer season in the U.S. is always marked by a lot more, thunderstorms. They really roil operations. And I think, this latest, over the last couple of days, this latest interruption is a function of those storms and then a lack of enough employees to bounce back well at the airlines. And, we don't see the employment situation improving dramatically this year. And the weather is what it is. And so I think really passengers flying this summer, I think can expect it. I mean, we're starting to see some changes to the schedule out in August. We're seeing sort of 7-8% of the schedule being cut since they first put it out in April, or since we looked in April. So we're starting to see a little bit of an easing of the schedule. But I think this summer, I think if you're a flyer, I think you sort of count on potentially some challenges.
Well, and we just heard from that pilot saying, look, they're exhausted. The overtime hours they're putting in are just crazy. Do you have any concerns that the pilots are working beyond the protocol norm and that anything could be compromised? I mean, those guys have to be so fatigued.
So I will tell you, U.S. pilots are very, very professional group. And the airlines, I think, will absolutely not work them past, their FAA limits. There's a little bit of a backdrop here as well. The pilots are in the middle of negotiating a new contract as well, right? And so United has a contract. We don't have the details. I suspect they'll get a good contract here because of shortages in the pilot ranks in the labor force. But so there's a little bit of that, I think, in the background as well, as the pilots want probably some different work rules and some pay increases. They'd probably love to see the airlines get to an agreement with them now, especially in front of a potential, again, slowdown in the U.S. economy later this year.
All right. George Ferguson, we appreciate your insight on this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Next, a heartbreaking revelation from Uvalde, Texas, about how one officer's decision could have made a huge difference in the mass shooting that took 21 lives. Stay with New Day. We're back after a quick break.
Nothing is ever given to you in life. If you want to be a great businessman, you got to put in the work. And the same applies to survivors of trafficking. My name is Given Kachepa, and I'm now a dentist in Dallas, Texas. I grew up in Zambia. We grew up very poor. I was trafficked into the United States by an organization known as TTT Partners in Education. The mission of the organization was to go to African countries and bring kids to America to sing in churches. We were singing in malls. We were singing in schools. So the ministry had different ways of making revenue, and yet those of us that were singing were not receiving a penny from that. My dental practice is based here in North Dallas. We've been here now 5 years. It's been an exciting, wonderful journey. My goal as a dentist in the future is opening up clinics in Zambia. We have 2 of them that we've built from the ground up. And being a business person today, I just cannot foresee a situation in which I would work somebody without compensating them for the work that they're doing. It's important to me that we all try to get along and make life a little bit easier for each other.
Advancement, adaptation, new Marketplace Middle East.
From digital banking to biometric payments, we take a look at innovation and technology in the future of finance.
Marketplace Middle East, today on CNN.
U.S. Embassy officials in Moscow were able to visit detained American Paul Whelan in a Russian prison yesterday. It's the first time officials have visited him since last November. Whelan has been in Russian custody since December 2018, when the State Department says he was wrongfully detained and then later convicted of espionage charges. Secretary of State Tony Blinken tweeted in part, quote, "Paul's resiliency throughout this nearly 3.5 years of detention by Russia is remarkable. We will never stop advocating for his release."
Well, a 70-year-old man is in custody now after allegedly shooting and killing 3 parishioners at an Alabama church Thursday night. Authorities say Robert Finley Smith acted alone. He occasionally attended St. Stephen's Episcopal Church before opening fire at a small group's potluck dinner. The victims have been identified now as Walter Rainey, Sarah Yeager, and an 84-year-old woman whose family requested her name be withheld. There are new revelations about last month's mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas now.
The New York Times is reporting that an officer armed with an AR-15 had the opportunity to shoot the gunman as he approached the school, but he chose not to. Here's more now from the reporter who broke that story, speaking last night to CNN's Anderson Cooper.
This is a situation where officers were arriving really minutes after the first 911 call came in of a gunman at the school. And a lot of focus of the investigation into the police response has been on what happened inside the school and why it took so long for those officers to go into the room and actually confront and kill the gunman. But what it turns out happened outside the school before the gunman even went in was that one of the Uvalde police officers who arrived within minutes at the scene actually had a opportunity to take a shot at this gunman. And what he told a deputy sheriff from a neighboring county who I spoke to was that they were under fire at that time, and he passed up the opportunity to take that shot because he feared that that shot might go awry and hit one of the children that he said he could see behind the gunman. And so in that split-second moment where he made that decision and hesitated, the gunman went inside the school.
Remember, 19 children and 2 teachers were killed in that massacre. A Texas House committee investigating the shooting continues to talk to first responders to sort out exactly what happened amid criticism of the police response there. The Department of Homeland Security is investigating a possible heat-related death of a Guatemalan woman and a Mexican man found on the side of a Texas highway on Sunday.
Yeah, the heat, as you know, is not the only danger migrants face on their journey north. There are assaults, there are robberies, there are drownings in canals or falls from border fences as well. CNN's Priscilla Alvarez has more on just how big a problem this is and how officials in Texas are responding now.
In these roaring waters, first responders train for the worst. Migrants who have been swept away while trying to cross the U.S.-Mexico border.
You get pushed underneath, you get pushed out, and so, you know, it could mean life or death.
Already, authorities say there have been 8 deaths here in the span of a week, signaling a grim outlook for the summer as migrants journey to the border in extreme conditions. The canal here, intended to get water to farmers, poses a unique danger with higher water levels and a fast-moving current.
What we're going to do now is what we call a live bait.
Chris Menendez, captain of the El Paso Fire Department water rescue team, is bracing for more rescues and potential drownings.
We can throw a rope, throw them a ring, and they can rescue themselves off of that device. But a lot of times, that's not the case. We come in when it's too late, they're deceased.
Rescues already outpaced last fiscal year. Since October, there have been more than 14,000 searches and rescues along the southwest border, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection. That's compared to over 12,800 in fiscal year 2021. Border officials are on high alert, issuing warnings about the sweltering desert heat and crossing dangerous waters.
Migrants will also try to climb over the border wall and fall in the process. In the El Paso sector, there have been over 229 injuries since October from those falls. Agents will try to render aid or take migrants to the hospital if necessary.
A lot of the people who are at the shelter have been deported.
Dylan Corbett, head of the Hope Border Institute in El Paso, says built-up pressure and insecurity has driven migrants to make risky decisions.
It's an index really of desperation, an index of pain, an index of frustration of not being able to access asylum at our border.
A Trump-era pandemic restriction is still in effect on the border, allowing officials to turn away migrants. That hasn't dissuaded people, and thousands continue to wait in Mexico.
Had you come last week, the whole place was full.
Ruben Garcia runs a network of shelters here taking in migrants.
Over the past several months, the numbers have consistently been at 3,000 per week. 3,000 per week. So there were nights where we had close to 400 people sleeping here.
Southern border cities are adjusting to the reality that migration flows won't slow down. El Paso is now considering a processing center to alleviate stress shelters.
So what does this say about where we're going?
I really believe that this is the new world that we're going to be experiencing, and it's not going to be a temporary situation.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection stopped migrants nearly 240,000 times last month. That is a number that has gone up month by month, and it raises serious concerns among authorities as the temperatures climb into the triple digits. Priscilla Alvarez, CNN, El Paso, Texas.
Priscilla, thank you so much. So, prospective home buyers, I know the Fed's interest rate hike has made it really difficult, right? Well, we had a look at how we can navigate some of these new mortgage rates. That's next.
Back in person, the 2022 Afreximbank annual meetings will bring together high-profile continental and global leaders to harness and leverage Africa's incredible potential. Register now.
Wherever you go in the world, one airline goes further to make it feel exceptional. Qatar Airways, going places together.
Our challenge was to determine the best ways for our citizens and visitors to safely enjoy the Tokyo they know and love. Tokyo is a fascinating city that integrates both tradition and innovation. As governor, my first duty is to keep Tokyo safe. We cautiously monitor the global and local situation, consulted experts on safety measures, and began to apply new policies so Tokyo could begin to open. As we prepare for travelers from around the world to visit again, we look forward to welcoming you and hope these new measures make for a safer and happier environment for everyone.
All new African Voices Changemakers. Create opportunities. Impact communities. Transform lives. Artists use their craft to promote peace and celebrate self-expression.
Everyone can learn a lot from just doing self-portraits. That has helped me feel more confident.
African Voices Changemakers, only on CNN, in association with Glow.
I am Nigerian by blood, British by birth, and American by residence. It is important to me that those same strands of inclusivity that flow through me are mirrored in the stories that we tell. One World is a place where Africa has an equal seat at the global table alongside Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Every continent has a voice, and where everyone watching has a stake in the global conversation.
One World with Zain Asher, weeknights on CNN.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN. On the next Living Golf, discover the history of the sport in Sweden. How do they keep producing some of the world's best golfers? Hear from rising stars.
I think it's just more fun when a Swede wins.
Then visit the region's flagship event, the Scandinavian Mixed, and sit down with Europe's next Ryder Cup captain, Henrik Stenson.
This is where it all started for me.
Living Golf, tonight on CNN, in association with Gulf Saudi. Transformation, technology, new Marketplace Europe.
A Davos of difference, a WEF like no other, as leaders face historic crises.
Marketplace Europe, Sunday on CNN.
I'm Wolf Blitzer. This is CNN.
Homebuyers are already feeling the pinch of the Fed's latest rate hike. Surging mortgage rates are putting pressure on the housing market, pushing the cost of homeownership even higher.
Yeah, this week's mortgage rates jumped to 5.7%, up from 5.2% the week before. That is the largest one-week increase in more than 3 decades. CNN's Brian Todd has more for us here on how we can navigate these higher home costs.
Look at this.
Dana Burns got some sticker shock recently when shopping for a new house in the Phoenix area.
$500,000? I don't think so. I know not.
Dana's certainly not alone in navigating higher home prices and steeper mortgages. At the end of 2021, 30-year fixed-rate mortgages in the U.S. had interest rates of only about 3%. Now the rate is approaching about 6%. And with the Fed's interest rate hikes just announced, getting a mortgage could cost some home buyers hundreds of thousands of dollars more.
For an average home buyer, it could cost upwards of 6 figures, more than $100,000 over the course of a 30-year loan today versus if they had purchased perhaps 6 to 7 months ago.
What's the first thing a prospective home buyer should do right now as interest rates climb?
The first thing you ought to do is sit down and look at all your debts. Because before you go look at the house, before you fall in love with that house, look to make sure you can handle that payment. And here's something else that I'm going to tell you that a lot of people don't tell you. Don't go by what the bank says that you can afford, because they're going to look at your gross income. They're going to look at all your debts, and they're going to look at your gross income. But guess what? You don't take your gross income home.
Most financial experts advise put as much money down for your home as you can. One key component home buyers have to navigate, whether to get a fixed rate mortgage of 15 to 30 years with an interest rate that never changes, or a so-called ARM, an adjustable rate mortgage with interest rates that go up and down depending on the markets and when the government raises or lowers rates.
If you think that you'll be there for less than 5 years, an adjustable rate mortgage would definitely be the way to go because it's a lower monthly payment. If you think you're going to be staying longer than 5 years, a 15-year or a 30-year mortgage would be great. It just depends on what monthly payment you're able to carry.
With mortgage interest rates climbing, is now even a good time to buy? Our experts are torn.
Renting does not mean that you are a financial failure. Renting in an environment where we might have a recession will allow you to pick up and move maybe where the jobs are.
If you are able to make a down payment and qualify for a mortgage, it will cost you less to own that home than it would be to rent the same property.
What's a common mistake people make when taking on a new mortgage, buying a new home? One expert we spoke to says many people simply buy too much house, overestimating the affordability of their mortgage, not factoring in the maintenance costs of the house. Brian Todd, CNN, Washington.
Brian, thank you, and great information from Michelle Singletary there. So more than 25 million of you are under heat alerts today. We're talking some serious triple-digit temperatures here. We'll give you all the latest and what to expect in just a moment. Also, want to tell you about tomorrow night. Join Earth, Wind & Fire, Chaka Khan, The Roots, and other stars as they lift their voices for Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom that is live at 8 p.m. only here on CNN.
It is forecasted that about 40% of the population in the world suffer from water shortages in 2050 due to climate change and population growth. And water is one of nature's greatest gift. So we decided to upgrade our water intensity by 50% and replenish more water than we use in our own plants globally by 2050. As a matter of fact, we've been working on this almost for 20 years by setting up a local watershed conservation and education for children. We are moving toward the international and global expansion. We want to raise awareness in the world that water shortages will come, and we have to be careful. We have to take action together. So we want to lead this initiative.
I'm Salma Abdulaziz in Kyiv, and this is CNN.